Welcome back to the Desert Harvest podcast about culinary and agricultural themes. We cover a variety of topics that revolve around Arizona. Although I think that, Warren, I think we're universal. I think the things we talk about hold true outside of Arizona.
Oh, absolutely. We're using our home as kind of a symbol of what could be done nationally and internationally, I think.
Yeah, so like a universal theme might be on occasion somebody has a little too much to drink. Is that I don't know if that's ever happened to you,
Never.
never happened to you. But I've heard of people that's happened sometimes on their birthday, get a little loose. Have you ever woken up though with a vineyard in your name by the time
It,
you had a
it's a dream of mine, but I've never been able to do it.
Yeah, me too. So we have some extraordinary people with us, and I'm always attracted to sort of Renaissanceism, and I feel like our guests are Renaissance people in the sense that they have a very analytical and kind of scientific mind, and then an artistic disposition as well, and that I think creates an extraordinary combination. Uh, the reason why I make the comment about the birthday is that one of our guests had a 50th birthday in Argentina, and it was sort of a famous night because the day he woke up after a great party, he happened to own a vineyard. So, Phil and Kim Asmundson, thank you for spending time with us. We're really grateful that you did.
It's great to be here and looking forward to our conversation. Every time we talk, we seem to discover new things with you guys.
Well, and one thing I'd like to say is we have talked. Pete and I have done quite a few episodes of the Desert Harvest, and we've covered lots of topics. And Deep Sky and you have come up
Yes.
quite a bit, and so we're glad that you're on to actually let people know what you're really about, because we've probably messed it all up in the past.
I was going to say we've talked a whole bunch about wine and totally don't know anything about it. So we've been buffaloing the audience. We're glad to have some experts. So as winemakers in Arizona, one of the things that Orrin and I are very interested in is bringing to the world sort of the knowledge that Arizona is an amazing place for wine. And I don't think that everybody knows that. Your wine, I think, is, for me, it's as good a wine as I've ever had in my entire life, in all honesty. Not that I'm a wine expert, but for me, I can report that I loved it. And across all the different ones that I've tried of yours, I'd like to ask you, when it comes to Arizona and making wines in Arizona, because I don't think it's obvious to everybody that we do such great work here. What are they missing? Like, what does the world need to know about the advantages of making wine here in our home state?
Sure, and that's a great question. In fact, I can start by bringing up the whole thing about waking up on my 50th birthday and having a vineyard, because the vineyard is not here in Arizona. It is in Mendoza, Argentina, where we went for my birthday. And I'm going to start there by, a lot of people think the disadvantage here is we don't have a climate for growing grapes, but the reality is we have the perfect climate for growing grapes. 80% of the grapes grown here are grown down in southern Arizona. There's a strong, strong similarity between Uco Valley, where the grapes are in Mendoza, and southern Arizona. So much so that it's almost startling. We did not know this when we bought the two vineyards, but when we started looking at documents, we realized what it was. So let me give you a couple of things that are the same. The latitude in southern Arizona is 30 plus something latitude. The latitude in Mendoza is 31 degrees something.
Wow.
The altitude here is 4,200 feet in Wilcox. The altitude down there is 3,600 feet. All the water comes from runoff from mountains that go into aquifers. We have nearly identical rainfall. I think it's different by half an inch over a 7-month growing period, almost identical for each of their October is our April. And so, even the temperature is only different by about 2 degrees over the entire growing season. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that we grow such wonderful fruit. It's just you would not expect it. And just to give you a little bit more information on Mendoza itself, it is the fastest growing wine region in the world. And let me put that in perspective. Napa, everyone knows Napa. They first planted grapes there in 1836, and in 2023 they produced 49.1 million cases of wine. That is a tremendous output of wine from Napa. In Uco Valley, they started planting grapes in 1982, and in 2023 they produced 171 million cases of wine.
Wow.
So if they can do it there, there's a strong reason. There's no reason we can't do it here, because as long as you got that altitude
Right.
and latitude in a similar range, you're going to be able to grow great grapes here. You just need to pick the right varietals. So that would be number one on my list. Is it's actually great to grow grapes there. Second is our concentration of tasting rooms. You know, if you spread them out all over the state of Arizona, it's kind of hard to get to them because we don't have that many. In fact, I think I'll get to that a little later, how many we have, but they're dominated up in Sedona, where you get a lot of visitors who come. So that kind of spreads the word, if you will, to other states when they go back. Maybe they can demystify that myth I just talked about.
Right.
But the other thing is we have it down in southern Arizona as well. There are tasting rooms both in Tucson and in Wilcox. And what's both nice about both those regions is, although they're not in a major metropolitan region, both are within an hour and a half of Sedona, being an hour and a half of Phoenix, and Tucson being about an hour north of us in Sedona. Probably our biggest problem is people knowing about us. And so that's something that we need to deal with. But otherwise, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to grow much faster than we are. And I'll get into some of that other stuff later. Kim, I think you were going to talk about a couple other things.
Yes, another thing that is wonderful about visiting Arizona wineries is that they're mostly family operations. So when you go in, you don't have somebody just pouring 5 wines and putting a piece of paper in front of you saying, these are the tasting notes. You're often talking to the winemaker or the owner. And through those conversations, often we take people on a tour. Oh, you want to see how we do that? Let's go into the winery. Last weekend, I took a number of people into the field, and they wanted to understand how the vine grew, because all the leaves are off now, so you can really see the structure. And they just loved it. It's that hands-on approach that you get with the type of industry in Arizona that we have. Another advantage of growing grapes in Arizona is the University of Arizona. We have partnered with them on a lot of different projects. We can call them if we have bugs, diseases. There have been 2 research projects that they've contacted us and said, can we do this research project in your field? And we've said, sure, come ahead. And one of them went for about a year, and another one involving water was several months. And they just came in and took samples about disease, and then they send me the results. So it's a wonderful partnership. We also learn a lot from the Southwest Wine Center up at Yavapai. They have a wonderful program, and a lot of people coming out of there then help staff some of the wineries.
Okay.
Well, I can attest, it's Kim, you mentioned something very interesting about Pete and I have talked about this in previous episodes, but I remember when I first started ordering wines from you and from some other winemakers in the Sonoyta Elgin area. And I think Phil, you were the first one to come up and taste wines with me.
Yeah,
and
doing that.
and I was so used to, because I used to operate restaurants in the Washington DC area, and that fine dining and the whole deal. And we were always just used to, a rep or, somebody coming from the wine distribution company who, didn't really have a vested interest in the wine. And so I think it's wonderful. And whenever I tell other restaurateurs about my experience with you and with James and some of the other folks that I worked with, I say, this has to be what like Napa and Sonoma were like 70 years ago, like it's just such a great familial feeling. Like you feel connected in more than just a business transaction. And honestly, like our relationship and even just the few interactions we all had doing dinners and things like that, it motivated me to invest in that region, because in Sonoyta Elgin, because I'm so into seeing everyone benefit from, you know, this community effort. So I think that's a great point.
You know, now that you're a property owner down there in Sonoyta area, you know, one of the other things that we weren't really going to talk about, but both Sedona and Sonoyta are absolutely stunning areas.
Yes.
In both of those, you would never guess you were in Arizona. I mean, you would think you're in Montana. I mean, Wyoming. Somebody asked me, "Wow, this doesn't look like Arizona at all." And and they said, "What do I think?" And I said, "Well, first of all, I said I'm a big fly fisherman. I said if there were rivers with trout in it, it would be Montana."
Right.
But there are no rivers and there are no trout. So it is
right. Well, I was in Montana, and there's some people standing around me, and they're like, "Man, if you would guess you were in Arizona standing around here." Yeah.
Yeah,
But
there's one other advantage I think we have, and that is that although we're a small industry, we're one that has the potential to make a lot of economic
yes.
gains in the state. And there was a report released in 2022. It was done by the National Association of American Wineries, and it took a hard look at what was the economic impact of the Arizona wine industry. And when you kind of parse through this whole report, I was shocked to find that the way they broke it down was genius, and they had a professional out, other company do the survey who was good at that. And they came to a conclusion that we were contributing about 4.2 billion in economic impact to the state of Arizona.
Wow.
And we're new, we're nascent. We are really a young industry, but we want to be a hungry industry. And we're hoping to use things like that and others to get more attention from state reps and state legislators, because we think we're onto something here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of this. But there's a bunch of opportunities for a lot of people.
Nice.
Yeah, I love that. And Orrin and I will often talk about the notion of a virtuous cycle as opposed to a vicious cycle. And we are firm believers as it relates to a person's physical health that, where they're connected to the agricultural supply chain, food, of our country matters a great deal to their health. And I would include, the work that you're doing is not just producing something that is pleasurable, but I think it's being produced in the right way. And we're a firm believer that things that are done right end up benefiting people physically, but also economically. We think that when agriculture done in a particular way, and we're believers in regenerative agriculture and many other ideas that we think produce the most nutrient dense, delicious sort of food, end up actually impacting the community positively from an economic standpoint. Now, I did not know it was $4.2 billion. That's extraordinary. Now, I know technology is something that has been a part of your past and that you've brought into this industry. And I am curious as it relates to growing the business and the economic opportunity. Scaling is an issue everywhere. And so you have to have the right tools in order to go from 4.2 billion to whatever the ultimate number is. Could I ask you to talk a little bit about how technology impacts the business?
Sure. And mostly for us, it's been in the field. I mean, if you go into a tasting room, you're going to have a POS system and things of nature. But the thing to remember here is that the vineyards are not located where many of us live. I mean, we live in Marana, which is north of Tucson. Our Wilcox Vineyard's a little over 2 hours away. Our Sonoyta Vineyard and tasting rooms just shy of an hour and a half away. So it's not necessarily easy to get there. And so, we had to find ways where we could be virtual and be engaged and be able to make the types of decisions which would make an impact on our business, both in Elgin and at both of our vineyards. Some of the easy things to talk about, and then I'll get into a little bit more about what we did in our Wilcox Vineyard. Is wells right now our big issue, and we'll talk a little bit about what happened down in Wilcox, where the legislature came in and declared it an AMA. And if you don't know what that is, that's an active management area, and they are stopping the drilling of wells. And that's in many ways it's good, but it would be horrific to the wine industry.
Right.
And so, but they can undo it. It wasn't voted by the people. So, they can undo that. And I think we need to educate them some, and they will get around to us. But we'll get to that a little later. So we monitor our well. We know how deep it is. We know how much water we're losing a year. And why are we losing it? Well, we're losing it because we're using water through irrigation. So before I get to irrigation, though, the other big thing that nobody ever thinks about is frost fans. We do get frosted down there. And so we have a frost fan. We measure the temperature above the fan at the ground level, and that fan will kick on. Those are the two things besides irrigation that can make the biggest deal. You don't want your well to run dry. And boy, if there's a frost coming in, you want to deal with that immediately.
Could you explain what a frost fan is really quick? Because that might not be self-evident.
Yeah, a frost fan is located right in the middle of our vineyard. So our vineyard's shaped like kind of like a big cross, and right where that cross crosses, or where the two lines cross, there's a fan that goes up, about 75 feet?
Yes.
Yeah, it's about 75 feet on a big monopole. And it's got giant blades that look just like they are like a giant airplane propeller.
Okay.
They're there because if it notices frost, cold air sinks. So when it's sinking down to the ground, if it's warmer up above, what ends up happening is the fan will kick on. And when it kicks on, it will pull the warmer air down and start running it along the ground to push the warm air or the cold air out of the way. And it's trying to do that before it gets down to the ground. So it's not measuring at the ground, it's measuring it above the vine.
Okay.
And that can make all the difference in the world. Those who don't have frost fans have had some pretty bad frost experiences. We've been mildly frosted a couple times, generally when it's not at 30 degrees or 35 degrees, but when it gets down into the low 20s.
Sure.
And then even a frost fan is hard to do anything for you. But they're essential. You'll see them in almost all all of the different wine regions, especially ones that have a tendency, especially in the early spring, where frost is really, really bad. Is the first thing the flowers do is they bud out, or the vines do, they bud out. Once those tiny buds are very delicate, everything's going to come from that. The fruit, the shoots, everything, the leaves, everything comes from that. If they get frozen, there's no fruit on that vine.
Okay.
So that's the reason for having it.
Okay. So it's not an opportunity for ice wine. It is a lost season.
Ice wine is when it gets frozen at the end of the year, when the grapes are
Okay.
then it is an opportunity for ice wine. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But you got to go to Canada and Minnesota and Wisconsin for stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right,
even Long Island. Even Long
Island and northern New York. So there's no question about that. But anyways, let me tell you this story real quickly. I was involved. I was a partner at Deloitte, and I ran our technology, media, and telecom practices. And because of that, I met a lot of technology people. I met a guy who was with us but had left us, and he had a really interesting idea. It was like a distributed system where you would gather data from disparate areas out in a network somewhere. And we got the idea that what if we could do that in a vineyard? And what that would consist of is we would place moisture sensors in every single one of our irrigation blocks. And you got to imagine this is about a 4-foot long post, about 3 inches in diameter. And at certain points on that rod that you stick into the ground, there'll be a moisture sensor, and those would be at 4, 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40 inches.
Okay.
And so the idea was, if we stuck those in there, could we get meaningful information that we could use to maintain the health of our vines, but even more important, grow better fruit? That was the real reason for doing this.
Right.
And we learned a lot as we did this. So we had to figure out what was useful. And I will tell you, it took us a whole year before
Yeah.
we said, this is garbage. Why are we even doing this? It was just crazy. But what we ended up learning was how water went into the soil. At what rate did it go in the soil?
Yeah.
Did it
Yeah.
do it at the same rate for each zone? And the answer was absolutely not. One of the craziest things we found was that everyone waters mostly by time. So you buy these little plastic emitters that you punch into the tubing, and based on their size, they're a half-gallon emitter or 1 gallon emitter, and that's on every hour. So everyone says, well, if I put an emitter on both sides of a vine, then I must be getting 2 gallons for every hour I water. Wrong. That doesn't work that way. First off, everyone's forgetting those emitters sell for about 7 cents a piece.
Right.
I don't know anything at 7 cents a piece that's that accurate.
Right.
But it's not all their fault, because what we learned was as you got further and further away from where the well was, or it was a bigger zone with more plants, there's something called head loss. As you go further out, the pressure will decrease. So it's not
yes.
able to come out the emitters as well. If you have a zone that has very few plants in it and it's near where the well is, it's going to drip a lot more. So what we did is we put gallon sensors. We measured the amount of water that went in. So when we said we wanted 10 gallons per vine, we knew how many vines placements there were in that zone. So we put that many gallons. So however many there were times 2, that's how many gallons we put into the irrigation system into that single zone. And so in doing that, we got very, very accurate measurements of what was going in. So how did we?
Did you have to re-engineer the equipment, or did you just use the equipment in a different way?
Well, the sensors we didn't do anything to. We just put them in the ground. All they're doing is measuring what water's there. But we did have to build a backbone where we could get all that information back to our shed area, where we had a computer that was going to do it. Here's where all the magic starts to happen. Because the question was, when I first got the data, I looked at it and said, I have no idea what this means. And they were all a bunch of numbers, and those were supposedly the soil moisture. But there's another kink to this whole thing. Soil moisture is dependent on the type of soil you have.
Right.
So what happened was, as we started looking at it, we would start watering in like April, in February, when nothing was growing. So we knew nothing was taking up water. And we were doing that to fill it with water. But what we watched was, when we dripped it on for 10 gallons, let's say, we watched, because we took a measurement every 6 minutes. And that got captured by the computer. We would get that out. And we'd look and we'd see, well, how much got down to 4 inches, and then how much got down to 8, and how much got down to 16, how much got down to wherever. And when you're putting 20 gallons on, you'll get all the way to 40 inches. But what's interesting, you'll put it on, and for the first 2 gallons, it'll only go to 4 inches, and that's it. It will not go anywhere else. And suddenly it starts leaving 4 inches and it goes down to 8, and the same thing repeats itself, and then does it again and goes down to 16 and repeats and repeats and repeats. That's because soil has a number of key points, and one of them is called the saturation point. So whatever that number was, where it finally let the water go down to 8 inches, that was the saturation point. Until we reach that, it would not go to 8 inches, and that continues down. The next point is what's called the field capacity point, and that's the amount of water any level can hold against the force of gravity. So gravity couldn't, if let's say that point was 60, and the individual numbers aren't important, except to say it's always that number. It's always that number. So you watch. Once it gets to 60, it won't release any water anymore. So it's the water is stuck there, and then but below it, before it gets to 60, it'll keep going down. And so what we got there was what all those points were. Now we shut the water off, and for about 24 hours after the irrigation, the water would keep moving, because some of those deeper depths still were not at field capacity; they were at saturation point. But now, we started watching the numbers drop. The plants were pulling the water out. They were pulling it out and pulling it out, and you could watch this curve, very steep curve, in the early couple of days. Then it would start to level out, and then it would almost go flat. We were seeing that how much water could the water pull out, because the soil itself will hold onto that water really hard, and it won't let it go. And so we're figuring out what are those places. So we were able to literally do watering over and over and over again. And we knew how many gallons, if we only wanted to get to 8 inches, or we wanted to get to 16 inches, or we wanted to get to 20. And the best thing we could do about it was that flat line. That flat line doesn't sound important, but it was extremely important, because what it did is it showed us where the plant was struggling to take up any more water, because we'd add the total
Okay.
of what went down at each of the depths. And what that meant was it couldn't get water. And so we were stressing the hell out of the plant. We only do that one time during the growing season. And that's when we're at that point where the flowers are turning into berries. Why would you do it then? Because we did it then, because if you withhold the water as we see it getting close to that with our eyes up above on the ground, we don't water it anymore for about 2 days. The plant freaks out and decides to set smaller berries. Now, most people say, don't you want big berries? No, not in red grapes, because in a red grape, all the flavors in the skins, all the pulp is juice. It's liquid. It's got some pulp in there too, but the flavor is all in the skin. So if I can shrink the berry, I'm increasing the ratio of skin to juice, and that makes,
which is less water in a sense, right? I mean,
it makes a
in
bigger
the aggregate.
Yeah, it makes a bigger, bolder red wine, and that was the biggest thing we learned from that, and it was an eye opener for us. We also did it because we knew how many gallons we had to put on in any one zone to get our nutrients down to the level where we knew it would be most best be taken up. We also learned that during that time when we would not water it for a while, we were stressing the hell out of the vine. 95% of the water was drank at 4, 8, and 16 inches. But the moment we start stressing it, guess what? That vine went right down to 24 and 36 inches and started pulling the water. And I called that was my analogy, was that's the last beer in the fridge.
Yeah.
You don't touch it. And if you think about it, vines aren't stupid. They know where the water comes from. It comes from the surface and comes down. So they're going to leave that alone until they absolutely need to tap it.
So you need that last beer in the fridge. Yeah.
That's so, one thing, Pete, as I'm hearing this, and Phil, that's incredible way of explaining it. We've talked about your newsletter before, and I just want to highlight this I love your email newsletter, and I think part of the reason is because it's not like a sales newsletter, so to speak. You're really letting folks into your experience, not just as winemakers and vineyard owners, but as it really is like an agricultural newsletter in many ways. So if you don't mind, we've encouraged our listeners to follow your newsletter, not to drink your wines, of course, but that it just reminded me. So do you get a lot of responses to your newsletter and your style of writing there?
Well, I'm the one that writes the
She writes it.
newsletter.
I contribute some things. Like I contributed my faux pas of serving a white wine way too cold that it tasted like nothing. And I had to tell her to put your glass to the side for 15, 20 minutes and come back. I apologize. My faux pas.
One of our tenets from the beginning was education. We wanted to give people knowledge and experiences and educate them about wine, and even admit when we do things wrong. So each time we try to come up with topics or what we're doing in the vineyard or questions from the tasting room. So it's just kind of randomly and whatever comes up.
Yeah.
Well, I could tell you it's a good competitive advantage, because when I read your newsletter, it reminds me that I'm just going to keep growing peaches and never try to grow grapes.
You're a very smart man.
Yeah. When so the net of the conversation regarding like your precise knowledge of water consumption is that less water was used I think, right? And one of the, not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I'm compelled to ask this question because I'm curious, over time, does the soil become fuller of organic material that changes the way water moves through it, or does the plant extract organic material and you're in like a race to replenish it or not? Because we certainly look at like agriculture as it relates to having animals on land and how the returning life to the soil will often drastically increase the field capacity of any given piece of land. So much so that, like, there's people who are trying to get people to adopt that, will show here's how much water a field full of animals can hold, and then here's the concrete of the conventional farms soil, and the water just runs off. So I'm curious, over time, has the field capacity changed, and does that have any relationship to the organic matter in the soil?
I don't think so. Well, we add a lot of nutrients, and that can have a little bit of an impact, but those are meant to be taken up by the vine.
Right.
It comes down to, there are really three classifications of soil that you farm in, and that's going to be sandy, it's going to be loam, and it's going to be clay.
Right.
And as you go from sandy to clay, the soil will hold on to water more. So if you have a very clayey soil, what you find is the field capacity won't change any, but the difference between field capacity and the plant can't pull water is going to be much narrower. So for instance, in more of a loamy soil that we have down there, I would find that certainly at the 4, and there's compaction that occurs as you go deeper and deeper. So at 4, 8, and 16 inches, you're going to see each zone get a little bit narrower, but they account for 95% of the uptake of water until you get to that, I need the last beer in the fridge kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if it's sandy, it'll run through deeper. And then the vines, as I said, they're smart. They know they're going to go where the water is, and they'll put their roots down there. So we do deep watering specifically to try to promote the root, the tap root, to put more feeder, because the tap root does not pull in the water. It's the feeder roots, to encourage it to put feeder roots down there.
We also do deep waterings to flush salts through. And getting back to nutrients, we use chicken manure, sea kelp. We've used gypsum because we tend to have a high pH in our soil.
Right.
We are generally organic. Last year we were 100% organic.
Nice.
And so we do try to follow the regenerative practices, but I'm not ready for the sheep yet.
Okay.
We do.
Okay. All right.
We do borrow some guinea fowl from next door, and we call them our pest control team.
They're great.
Yes.
They come across about 7 in the morning and work all day, and then as the sun starts to go down, they go right back to the fence.
Yeah, he fixed the hole, and I'm going to go back to him this spring and say, hey, you know what I need to do? I'm going to cut that hole up, because we need our pest control team.
That's right.
And they are loved because they're up at the tasting room. People are like, what the hell are they? It almost look like prehistoric birds from a distance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And they'll be looking at them and say, oh, those are our guinea fowl. Why do you have them? They're our pest control team.
You're right. Yep. Yeah.
They go back every night. That's a beautiful thing. They go right back over at night. They go back in their pen, but they love to come over there because they can wander everywhere.
Well, that's really cool, and that's great to hear, Kim, that you've been able to use that much of an organic practice to run the vineyard. I do, shifting gears a little bit now that I've spent a lot more time in Sonoyta. I really understand where your brand came from now, because I've spent a lot of time with a little bit of a fire out in the front of the house looking up at the sky. And so I think we didn't put it in in our initial outline for the podcast, but I think it is important for folks to understand that Deep Sky has a lot of meaning to it, and how you name your varietals, and where that kind of came from. Was that a passion before Sonoyta and Elgin and Wilcox?
That was Philip. I think I'll let Philip cover it.
If you look at our Argentina wine, it's not called Deep Sky Vineyard. It's called Asmundson Family Vineyard, and it will still be named that. But when we got to Arizona, we didn't know what to name it, because we spent our first vintage. We planted in 2011. Our first vintage was 13. We did not have a tasting room till April of 17. So we didn't have to think about any of this. We were just trying to figure out how to make wine. And once we started making a little bit more wine, we said, geez, you know what? We need a place to sell this. So we ended up in Sonoyta. We were very happy to be there, lucky to be there, I would say. But when we were looking at the name, I have a telescope that allows you to take pictures, and there are a series of buttons on a pad that if you press it, it will tell you what you can take photographs of. And one of those is called Deep Sky. And if the Deep Sky button is pushed, it'll tell you objects that are outside of the Milky Way galaxy. Now, let's put in perspective, the Milky Way galaxy is 100 million light years across. Has about 400 billion stars in it. So I said, boy, that's really exploring. And that kind of stuck in my head. And what ultimately happened was, as I thought about making wine in Arizona, I said, this is really exploring how to do this. It had been done for a while, but we were just exploring how to make great wine in Arizona.
Yeah.
And so I just said, let's call it Deep Sky. We're exploring the universe, but we're also exploring the universe of Arizona wine. And that's where that name came from.
Very cool. Love it. And do you feel when you talk about your wines, when I try to explain somebody what Deep Sky is all about, I talk about the Malbecs, I talk about the relationship with Mendoza. That's kind of what I remember a lot from our discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you're a Malbec centered operation or brand, or do you see yourself as a lot like I'm sitting here looking at a Syrah, but how do you explain what you do? And
well,
yeah, it's hard to say. We have fans of all of our different wines.
mm-hmm.
We try to make single varietals of everything we make, as long as it's a good year. But then we try to make blends. So going back to our education component, taste a Grenache on its own, taste a Syrah, taste a Mourvedre, now taste a blend led by Syrah. So we have people that come in and they just want to drink our Syrah because they love it. So I think we are relatively balanced. We're known for our Big Bang, for our Malbec, but they're true fans of everything we make.
Well, and all of our names have some. The reason we name them in these weird names is because it relates to the wine itself. So one of my favorite wines is Supernova, which is a Mourvedre. And Mourvedre, if you're not familiar with the grape, is absolutely one of the most beautiful, luscious, fruit-flavored wines there is. And it's not lighter fruits. It's more of a medium fruit. So you'll get blackberry in there, and you'll get a little cherry in there, but you also get some beautiful raspberry, and it explodes in your mouth. So to me, Supernova, the death of a star, a super sized star, is an explosion of a star. It just blows up, and it blows up because iron starts to build up in its core, and it can no longer be stable, and gravity crushes it, and boom. So there's stories like that. In the case of Black Hole or Petite Syrah, we were actually up in Maynard Keenan's winery because they made our wine, our 2015 vintage. And I held up my glass because it was so dark, and I put it up to the light, and I said, I can't see any light through there. It must be a black hole.
Oh, very nice.
So that's where the name came. And the only other thing I'd say about it, and people, when we tell them this story, they're like, well, you must be a really good marketer. I said, we're terrible at marketing. this was like, everywhere we stepped in it, and it was great, but we have a little symbol on there that looks kind of like a spaceship. It's got a line on it, and it's got kind of a triangle on top and bottom. But it looks like people say, is it a galaxy? Is it a star? Is it a spacecraft? What is it? And it says none of those things. It's A in the north for Arizona, and it's A in the south for Argentina. And the line is the 22.5 degree slope or tilt of our earth that gives us seasons, that allows us to grow grapes.
Yeah.
Right.
When I was reading, that was a lovely part of the about you in the website. I was reading that, and I have seen that symbol or the logo many times, but it didn't occur to me how much significance there is. That's amazing.
Well, and here's an odd one for you. The first wine we ever made was our Viognier. It's called Aurora. Starts with an A and ends in an A. Argentina.
Oh, perfect.
A.
Oh, nice.
So I told her maybe we have to. We're going to Australia because our daughter-in-law is from there. I said, Hey, Australia starts with an A and ends with an A.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
No,
yeah,
no
yeah,
more.
yeah. Followed by Austria and Albania.
Yeah, I know.
That's right. Ice wine.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well, they say the best marketing is to be authentic these days. So you all are definitely authentic, and that's great marketing in my book.
Well, as we speak about like the business of the business and the economic impact that you describe is extraordinary, but you also describe it as we're at the beginning in many ways. So, and I understand that we've come a long way. And from what I understand of history, there were old vines that we ripped out, and so in Arizona, there
Yep.
seems to be an ebb and flow over generations. But when you look ahead and you look about where we're going, do you have a sense of where we'll be in 10 years, 15 years?
That's a great question, and I think there's a couple things that play into that. Quite honestly, first off, I'd say in our opinion, we believe all the elements exist for Arizona wines to take off, and I'm just going to share a couple numbers with you because I was shocked to see this, and it makes me want to go and try to go up to Phoenix and make some pleas. So they listed out the top 41 states of making wine, because once you get below that, it's so little it shouldn't count. And of course, number one is California with 680 million gallons of wine. So I started going through that. I started looking for Arizona, and unfortunately, I had to go to the second page. And we came in at 29th out of 41. And that's okay. We're in the 41. So that's a good
yeah, right.
But what's a little disappointing, and if you're asking me is there a great opportunity, I would tell you, just looking at the states that are up above us, I think we have room to move up 15 spots potentially, maybe even more. But if you look at the one that's above us and then the one that's below us, then I'll give you a relevant one. Above us is Arkansas. Are you kidding me?
Right.
And no, that can't be.
Right.
And the one below us, not by a lot, by the way, is New Hampshire.
Oh, wow.
Do either of those hit you as a wine state, especially after what I said about the South growing region? I mean,
Right.
It's a no-brainer. I'm really going to package a lot of what I did to, Kim and I did to pull this together. I'm going to try to get a meeting with some of our state legislators and say, you have a tremendous opportunity to save this state. And I can show you how. And but the one that really bothers me is New Mexico. Just so you know, we're at 190,000 gallons. New Mexico, 750,000 gallons.
Wow.
That's almost an identical environment to us. We don't have
yes
that has high altitude. I was shocked by that, and I would say to these guys, our mission is in 5 years to exceed where they are in New Mexico. This is ridiculous. I mean, we have to find a way to do it.
Well, we have
that New Mexican swill, for crying out loud.
Well, we have a
I've had a New Mexico wine. It wasn't bad. It really
No.
but it wasn't as good as Arizona wine.
But you brought up something earlier when you mentioned Sedona, Sonoyta. I mean, there's so much going on here already. And Pete and I have talked about this a lot. And I'm really good friends with John, who founded Arizona Wilderness Brewery up here in Phoenix, and they're huge advocates for tourism in Arizona, and especially agritourism and around wine and brewing and all that. And so one of the things that we have the distinct advantage of is the scenery and the climate, and there's already so many attractions here. And just to add this vibrant, winemaking, this community of wonderful winemakers that are here, and but you get to enjoy it in such a serene environment. It's accessible. It's not quite as expensive as going to other places. I mean, there's so much working for us that it seems like we could easily climb up that ladder pretty quickly.
Right. I would definitely agree with you.
Well, yes, I would say Sonoyta needs more overnight housing.
Yes.
We definitely do, because people come down. I know it's only an hour from downtown Tucson, but they want to come down, spend the weekend. So I think that would definitely help.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think we need to market those areas much better, and I think we need to look at the state to help us do some of this. The fact of the matter is, if we were to look at and this is not, I wouldn't call it necessarily a disadvantage. It's just a fact. I mean, if you look at the wine industry in Arizona, I think it was in 2023 there were 156 bonded wineries in the state. None of them are big. I mean, we don't have corporate wineries here.
Right.
Those 156, they're a fraction combined of what Gallo is. I mean,
Right,
a
right,
fraction,
right.
tiny fraction. And because of that, that's great because you have all these different options. That's the great part about it. But I think you also get a lot of different experiences from all these places, and not just wine quality, but in the facilities you go to. And so, in my idea that we have to, I mean, let's face it, we have individuals who have different economic ability to grow this stuff. They have different business models, capital needs, all that stuff. Industry experience. We didn't have any industry experience. I think I was arrogant, and I said I can figure this out. And I couldn't.
How hard could it be, right, Phil?
Right.
But we almost need to try to write a template, and this is something that I think I know Kim just and the whole AWGA just had a meeting yesterday, but certainly a guy like Kent Callaghan. First off, he's a great guy. He shares his knowledge. Just, it's not sparingly; it is openly given. He was the one who told us what to plant in Elgin. But we need to come up with what I would call something, high tide floats all boats. I mean, and what is the right model for a tasting room, at least as we're currently organized, these smaller wineries, where we can get some rules around how you're making wine, what's your tasting room experience, all the elements that if you asked a customer, did you have a good time, that we start to get a little bit more consistent in that. And, I think that's very doable, but we got to probably put together a smaller group to kind of propose this and go kind of sell it to the various marketplaces. And we probably go and see what people are doing. And that's something that you brought up. The good part about our industry is sharing.
We generally are working together. For example, one of the issues when you grow grapes in Arizona is you can't call up somebody that's 10 miles away and say, hey, my bottling line doesn't work. Can you come fix it? Because nobody has that knowledge. So the wineries in Elgin got together. We hired somebody from California, flew him to Arizona. He went around, checked all the bottling lines, got a list of what we needed, went back to Arizona, got the parts, came back and fixed them all.
Yeah.
So we were able to work together for that.
Uh-huh.
And I would say in Sonori, what we probably need is an app that shows who has music this weekend, who is maybe doing barrel tasting, or we're just releasing this wine. So I think we need to work toward that. I know when we go to other wine regions, we will just go to one app and it will be, last summer we visited the Monticello wine region in Virginia, and we could go to one place and get everything we needed.
Yeah, and I was just going to bring up Virginia because we're there. It's number 11 on the list at 2.2 million.
Yep.
The one thing I'll say that we're very different, and a lot of our taste rooms are very small. I mean, they are in another building. They're just. But when you even in Virginia, you go to these places, they're beautiful. I mean, they are big operations. We don't have that here. Maybe we don't want it, but I think we're going to have to get there someday.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Pete.
No, I mean, I think there's an inevitability, and I think Maynard's trying to do some of that up north. I mean, Merkin is a different scale, I think, of tasting rooms than others in the area, and I don't see any way around. The refining of it will come with the scale. Those two things will go hand in hand, and the storytelling is where I feel like, Oren and I are trying to contribute to that. We decided to do this because we feel like we've insufficiently told the story, and the vehicle by which we get that story out, whether it's an app, perhaps there's a time when we do a movie or where we tell this story in a more dramatic. We are certain that as people connect with the story, they will come down and try it. Once they try it, I think the region itself, people don't think of it as a place to go take an overnight or a vacation that are local, but when they go down there, and I agree, there's not enough housing for what we want to see down there, but I think that's improving. Warren knows
Yeah.
somebody who built
Yes,
a spot.
Airbnb.
Well,
Yeah, excuse.
you brought up Virginia, and I mentioned earlier, that's where I grew up in the Washington D.C. area, and that's where I grew up in the restaurant business as well. And I used to run a consortium of chefs and restaurateurs, mostly fine dining, and we would introduce them to farmers in the Shenandoah Valley and around the Charlottesville area, and I could not get I started carrying Virginia wines. We started realizing how wonderful these vineyards are there. I couldn't get a chef or a som to pick up a Virginia wine to save their life. I mean, they wanted all California or the Oregon Pinots were coming on big at the time. And it's amazing how, you've seen it now, like it's this robust wine industry, but the local restaurant population wasn't buying from them for so long. I think that's changed now. And I think, that might be the same here, where if we could get more areas, it's a shame to me when I go to a restaurant and I don't see some Arizona wines on there, but I see it more and more these days. And
Yes.
so that's a good thing, but we have so much visitation here. I think one thing we talk about is a market, and Arizona is a large market for tourism and visitation. So I think we have the capacity to do it. It's just making people more aware of it, like you said.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, in all honesty, the market was softer last year in 2024.
Mhm.
I don't know what specifically it was, but I think, there was a, down of 5% to 8% maybe, all depended where you were. We need to be growing again, and there's no reason we can't. We've got all the elements to do it. It's just somehow we need to be more coordinated. We need to have the state knowing how big an impact we can make, and we need to go out and do it. And just getting back to this whole AMA thing again, the only problem is we need to get the vineyards. I think we need to get to the state and talk to them, and through discussion, get them to see the value we can bring. And if you indulge me a minute, I'll give you an idea of what I mean by that. Because if they would do that and set some reasonable amounts, as I said, you can, with 50 gallons a minute, you can easily water a 20-acre vineyard. So if you have to get 5 20-acre vineyards because you want to be bigger, so be it. But and 50 isn't all that far from 35. But the way you evaluate agriculture from an impact to a state is you look at two things, and in particular, really you look at the economic impact it brings. But in Arizona, you got to look at two things. You got to look at the amount of water those crops require, and then you look at the economic output, and you measure the water that is used in something called acre feet. And so if you imagine if you had an acre and you could fill it up with a foot of water, 12 inches of water, how many gallons would that be? And the answer is roughly about 325,000 gallons. And so you look at how much acre feet a crop takes, and then you look at the value of that crop per acre, and that'll give you a ratio of the economic value. And so I just did ours. And by the way, Kim, at this meeting, this guy who I haven't met yet, but I'm really looking forward. He said he wanted to meet me, probably because he's heard about some of the stuff I've done. But his numbers seem to mirror mine. When we look at our vineyard, we use on average about 1.08 acre feet of water. So just over that 325. And yet, if you look at the tons we produce per acre and you multiply that by the value of those grapes, we know what that is. This is a market price for it.
Right.
Our grape crop value per acre foot is right around $8,600. There are many that are grown in Arizona where they are using up to 7 acre feet of water, and the value, or 4 acre feet of water. I know those two in specific, but their economic value per acre foot is $400.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you just look at that, you say, well, it's not their fault. There's nothing you can do. They allowed them to grow these crops for a long time. But in the case of at least Wilcox, I would look at it and say, there's not a lot of area you couldn't plant down there with grapes. You have to look at all sorts of things. But if you're really trying to get an economic boom in this state, it's allowing the expansion of the viticulture in all of southern Arizona. It's currently got 80% of the grape growing. There's no reason it couldn't be 98% of the grape growing. And the economic
oil refinery of Arizona of sorts. I mean, you're turning water into gold in a sense. And
well, I mean, and I mean, the only way to talk about it, but you wouldn't talk about it, and until you had some plans, is you're replacing a low economic value per acre foot for a higher one. And it's not just the crop itself. We have limited water in this state, and we need to make sure that it's being used as judiciously as possible, and in a way that brings value to the entire state. And so that's going to be something I'm going to have to get together with some of the bigger leaders, probably Maynard and others, and say, we need to talk to them about this, because this is a real issue, not just for us. It's a real issue for Arizona.
Well, nothing against cotton growers, but I don't recall too many visitors coming here to see cotton fields.
No, they don't come to see cotton and corn, and whatever the other sorghum. We saw sorghum growing down there. I don't even know.
Right.
Alfalfa.
Yeah, alfalfa. They're not coming to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, can I get a glass of alfalfa? No.
Green juice.
Although we have some bread makers that have an analogy to refining water into gold that we could talk about a different time.
That is true.
One thing, hey, Pete, I do want to point out one thing before I forget. I've been to your tasting room now several times, and more frequently lately. And I have to say, it's you've done a great job. Like it's
Yes.
very relaxing to go sit out. You have those great Adirondack chairs, just look at the vineyards but I'm in the hospitality business, and I always notice when there's great hospitality. And I think his name is Dan. Is he your?
Yes.
He is the best.
Yes, and like immediately I'm there at 10:58 a.m. Breathing on the glass door. He's like, okay, I'm coming. But they're so nice. They always remember who I am. They ask how, when I was building the house right down the road, hey, how's it coming along? We saw it made incremental, improvements over the last month, but you have a wonderful staff. And I think that's, not only are you making wonderful wines, and we're big fans of your wines, but I think that's just speaks to you as business people and entrepreneurs, as how you treat your team and the team you've been able to retain there.
Yeah, and that is our secret weapon, all the way to James, our winemaking staff, all of that, and Shanna, who works with Dan. They're roughly about a year apart in age, and you would swear to God they were brother sister, because they just pick on each other in the right way. And you say, you guys grew up together, huh? No, you didn't, but how to do it. And we're cognizant of that. We've been looking at a lot of different things we can do, and if you come by, in the next couple of weekends, I'll be down there. But
okay,
we're going to be launching something called Beyond the Rim, and that does not mean we're going to go up to the what it is a series of really interesting. Mike would tell you he thinks the one thing we do better than anyone in the state in the wine business is we try to educate our customers. And we do that through a lot of on-site education. This is going to be something where they're shorter in duration, but one would be in the vineyard, where they would join Kim or others to go out there and learn each of the stages of the vines, and then work with the vines, and then do a tasting while they're in the vines. And the other the other is about wine itself. One might be, as you talked about, we have very unique labels, but what's the story behind our labels? And we'll bring them
right.
We're doing, but we're going to be launching one called Grapes to Glass, and it's going to be how wine evolves from right after it's processed all the way to when you drink an older version than the one.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the whole notion there is, what lies beyond the rim really refers, in my mind, since I came up with the line. Wine is a living object. It is not a non-living beverage. It changes with time.
Yes.
And as someone who drinks old Bordeaux for many, many years, when I say old, think 30, 40 years. I mean, the way they change is dramatic, and understanding why that occurs is part of the mystery of wine.
Yes.
And we're trying to demystify wine in a way, but not too much. We want to leave it.
Yeah. Well, we want to respect that. Warren and I are famous for our long conversations, and we want to be careful with your time. And as we come to the conclusion, will you tell us or tell our audience, where would you like them to follow you, learn about you? There's going to be people who listen that this is going to pique their interest. Give us a sense of where we should be following you guys.
Well, we have a website, which we're constantly tweaking. We also post to Instagram and Facebook. And I now have a young person who is doing some of the posts for us.
We needed that.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yes.
So they're looking much better.
Very good.
And those are probably, they can always sign up for our newsletter on the website.
And I would say the one thing about our newsletter is we don't pepper you. We send one newsletter out a month, and it tends to, I think Oren can certainly attest to this. It's just got relevant information that's useful about what we're doing up there, but also has some little story in there about something.
Yeah, that's nice.
No, it's it's a great newsletter. And I will say that I'm on your website. I was embarrassed. I told Pete, I said I was going to join your wine club last week, and I didn't. So I just did it. And but it's super easy. So I would encourage everyone to join your wine club. And just out of curiosity, because I didn't look, but do you have to live in Arizona to join the wine club?
No, we use a outside shipper, so we can ship to 35 states.
And we have multiple people who lived in Arizona and have now moved away in our wine club.
Yes.
We have a couple down in Norfolk, Virginia, and we have another couple that's up in the Finger Lakes region up in New York, and we're going to go up and see them next year.
Cool.
I always remember them fondly. They have the cutest little girl who wears these always different colored glasses. And
oh, nice.
She came into the tasting room and said, "My God, you're back. You're back."
So for all of you listening in New Hampshire who want some real good wine,
yes.
you know where to go to get it. deepskyvineyard.com.
Yes, we also use Wine to You in state, but there you have to call the tasting room. But the gentleman that runs it picks up from all the wineries in Sonoyta on Thursdays, and then he will call to deliver in his air-conditioned van. So anywhere in the state. So we can ship that way during the summer when we have to stop shipping through UPS.
Nice.
Okay.
So
tell us your Instagram handle, your Facebook handle, so that way we know you're there. But what is it? Tell us what it is.
I don't know. I think we're just on Facebook as Deep Sky Vineyard.
Okay, so when you tell us that marketing is a discipline that you need to improve, let's get what your Instagram is. I'm guessing
it's just Deep Sky Vineyard.
Guessing it's Deep Sky Vineyard, but maybe Oren, go find that for crying out loud.
Look,
Let's go.
You got 265 plus people here. I mean, everyone always gives me garbage because I ran this big technology practice and say, "Well, how do you not know how to do this?" I wasn't writing posts. I was talking about the direction technology was going. We were philosophically thinking about where the world would be in 10 years. I didn't think about the apps.
Well, listen, we are so grateful that you spent the time. Kim, go ahead. Were you about to say something?
No, just thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much.
It is Deep Sky Vineyard, by the way.
All right. All right.
And I'm not good with this stuff, but I found it pretty quickly.
Yeah. So we're thrilled that you spent time. We do talk about you. It seems like you come up frequently in our conversations, both personally and on this podcast. And that's, I think, a combination of, as Oren said, you guys are incredibly authentic. We're very fond of you guys personally, but the work you're doing, I think, is a reflection of that. And I think people that try it, there's, this notion of the intangibles that people put in what they make, come out in the end. And And we're just so delighted that we get a chance to share your story, and we're going to work to amplify it as best we can. So Phil and Kim, thanks for being here.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you
We
very
really
much.
enjoyed it.
Great.
Oren, come on by, and Peter, come down. Come on.
I'm going to come see
Yeah.
us. Yeah, maybe this.
Yeah.
You said you're going to be down there over the next few weekends.
We'll be down there this coming weekend, the weekend after that, and the weekend after that.
Right,
yes.
because Jay is here the
Yeah,
weekend
yeah.
of the 1st and 2nd.
We're down there the next 3 weekends, and then we head to Australia after that. To buy
Okay,
another
excellent.
because it's got an A and starts with A and ends with A.
All right.
right,
Well,
well-
good. We look forward to seeing you soon, and maybe planning that special event up here soon
We
too.
would love that.
I'd
Yes.
love to do it.
Yes. Time to resurrect that.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks
Yep,
for
you
joining.
as well.
us.
Thanks again.
All right. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.